Let's face it, we'd all rather be training outdoors, preferably somewhere like this. But if you're an endurance athlete, inevitably at certain times of the year, in certain weather conditions, you are going to be training indoors. So let's get you some hints and tips on how to hydrate for those sweaty indoor sessions. There are many factors that influence your sweat rate when you're training, but two of the major ones are the airflow around you and the ambient temperature. When you're outside, even if it's not windy, there is airflow because as you move through the air, your sweat evaporates and the airflow helps to move the heat away from your body, cooling you down quite effectively.
On an indoor bike or a treadmill, you don't have that natural airflow, so the sweat just drips off you, making you way more aware of it. And because you lack that natural cooling effect, your sweat rate probably goes up to compensate for it a little bit as well. As many of the places we train in indoors are already quite warm and humid, that reduces the temperature gradient and the evaporative gradient, which further hinders cooling and makes it a more difficult environment for the body to offload heat into. So in a like-for-like temperature, indoors, you are going to sweat a little bit more, as most people would perceive, because you can see it and you can feel it. So it's really important to know your hydration. So let's get into the advice now about how to hydrate properly for indoor training. The first thing to think about starts before your indoor session, turning up well hydrated. Athletes do have a habit of turning up to training sessions a little bit behind sometimes when it comes to hydration, and you can't afford that if you're going to do a long or hard, high intensity session indoors and you're going to sweat a lot. What you need to do to start well hydrated is not just drink loads of water, it's to take a strong electrolyte drink about an hour before you start. pH 1500 is great for this. You want to take about 500 millilitres of that about an hour before the start, and that is going to get you on the treadmill or on the bike optimally hydrated. Once the session gets underway, if you're doing a shorter or more intense session, you don't need to worry about drinking a set amount. Just make sure you've got bottles there, usually with electrolytes in, and make sure that you're drinking when you feel thirsty, because that will be enough to keep you hydrated the majority of the time. If you are doing a really long indoor session though, it's very useful to know how much sweat you lose and to try and drink enough to compensate so you don't get more than 2 or 3% dehydrated in terms of body weight loss, because that can really impact your performance at the end of that session, and it'll also massively impact your ability to recover. When it comes to recovery, if you've done a good job hydrating during the session and you're not training again later that day, you don't need to worry too much. You're just going to drink when you feel thirsty, you'll top yourself back up, and by the next day you'll be good to go again. If you have done a really hard session though, you've not done a great job drinking, and particularly if you've got a training session later on, so you're doubling up, then you're going to need to be more proactive about getting electrolytes and fluids back in. You can do this by adding some salt to your food. That will drive you to drink a bit more water and it will help your body to hold on to it. Or you could have another strong electrolyte drink which will do the same job. So there you have it. A few bits of advice for next time you're training indoors to make sure you're really well hydrated, getting the most out of your sessions. If you want to read more about this or anything else about fueling and hydration, link below to the Knowledge Hub on precisionfuelandhydration.com, where we've got loads more articles you can dig into.